I've been really looking forward to having this conversation for some time because I've been a fan of his work, been a fan of what he's doing on the interwebs. Not dissimilar to what I'm doing with the commentary about what's happening here in Canada, but more commentary that's happening in America and worldwide. And it's always concise and lighthearted commentary. And I want to welcome tonight Decoy Voice. Welcome to the show. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Am I here?
Yeah, doing good.
You've been on this thing before, but yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I've been a big fan of your content since, I don't know, I think I saw you when you were covering the Canadian protests, but you were the person that was on top of it most because I'm just over here in California watching some online content about what you got going on over there, but you were really like in the thick of it, so it's kind of cool to see your opinion on like just constant updates on it. So it's great to finally meet you online.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah, the convoy was basically how things took off for me, and it was largely because, well, those are my people. I grew up with truck drivers and stuff. I'm a mechanic by trade, and when that took off, I was like, I gotta talk about this. I've got cameras, and I'm doing this YouTube thing. Forget it. I'm dropping everything. I'm talking about these things. But yeah, absolutely love your work. And I had to throw in your catchphrase there: concise, lighthearted commentary, because that's what it is, really. And I really appreciate the music that you put to all your videos because it gives a much more of a lighthearted feel when you're talking about these like pretty dark issues that are happening in our society, and it's happening across Canada and the United States now.
And that's the sad thing is like I added the music to my channel because before it was just lighthearted commentary on stuff, but I was basically just a bootleg version of Tim Pool, not as good. But then when I started to add the music to it, my audience really didn't like it. It was kind of funny, but then as it kind of grew, people started to think, oh yeah, it was actually nice to hear just the doom that's happening in Canada and the US and China and all the things that are happening around the world. But it's almost like, I'm not a comedian, but it's almost just like a stand-up comedy bit on like, hey, look what's going on in the world, because it's hard to doom scroll. And that's essentially what we do a lot of the time is we're on Twitter, we're on Daily Mail, you're looking at Daily Caller or whatever it is. And it's just bad stuff after bad stuff. So I like to be able to give it to the audience and say, hey, here's what's happening out there, but let's try to laugh, even though it's really terrible and bad. But I mean, at least we can chuckle, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's you know, I've had people turn off from my content because I don't know, I have a coping mechanism where I'll chuckle at things like it's so ridiculous, it's like you laugh at it, and some people have been turned off. They're like, you can't, you're not taking any of this stuff seriously. I can't watch you. But a lot of other people, I think it's kind of a charm. It's a way of like coping with it because it is crazy. It is crazy what's happening in the West. Now, like, I mean, again, here I am laughing at the whole scenario, but
it's like our nervous tick to seeing, like, you know, essentially society melting down. But if we can't laugh at it, then what are we just going to sit on YouTube and cry all the day? It's like the only way, I think.
Really? And like, okay, so you're in California, you're pretty much at the precipice like of where everything's been happening in the US. I mean, University of Berkeley, you've got you know, the tech bubble and all of the woke mind virus that's come out of all of that. What's the view from the States of like what's happening in Canada? What do people like think of it?
So before I did the YouTube channel, all I had is just a couple friends that like to travel over to Toronto, or I have a couple people that I know that are over, and I believe it's Montreal. Is that the one that's kind of nearby? It's also on the East Coast. Yeah, all I know is they like to go travel there. They find it like, you know, the dollar goes further, so they like to kind of have vacations there, and they just think it has a cool nightlife, and also people are more friendly over there apparently compared to like Los Angeles. So that's what I knew just socially. But then as I did this channel and covered the trucker convoys, I realized, oh man, you guys have a very like totalitarian government. And the more I learn about the show and the more I learn about like his infatuation with how Chinese government controls their people, I realized, oh no, this is not like, you know, America North. This is China West. Like that's my insight on that. But that's only because I'm this very particular person that, you know, browses Twitter all the time and tries to look into things politically from just someone that's an average person. So I would say that in California, I know you guys are having a hard time, but then that's only because I do this channel.
Right, right. Because I mean, a lot of us don't remember the history in Mexico, because Mexico used to be an affluent country years ago,
Yeah.
and it went to shit. Like it actually went to shit, and because of that, largely, there, you know, the cartels and stuff kind of took over, and because, you know, the war on drugs and all this stuff, it doesn't seem like it's going to come out of that anytime soon. And my fear, because I'm a dual citizen in Canada and the United States, I
Oh,
don't
nice.
I don't want to have to go fleeing to the US. I love living in Canada. I love being here, but like we're close. I mean, when we have the environmental minister saying I'm a proud socialist on in the House of Parliament, and then providing no other things other than, you know, with this whole environmental thing, you know, what we need is socialism to get ourselves out of the, you know, the environmental crisis.
It's kind of funny that all roads lead to socialism when they look at climate issues, they look at crime issues, they look at the economy. They just, everything just leads to socialism. It's almost like they don't really care about what the problem is. They just care about if it's going to fearmonger somebody into accepting less rights. And that's scary because a lot of people are falling for it just because they're scared.
Absolutely. And I think that like us in Canada and you in California have so much in common about this whole thing. And even our migrant crisis, or the people leaving the country, like people are leaving Canada to move to Florida, people are leaving California to move to Florida, and it's largely the same stuff. It's this woke mind virus. It's like we saw it all blow up in the University of Berkeley a number of years ago. I don't know who's been paying attention on the internet long enough, but it was, you know, with Ben Shapiro, he would go speak at the University of Berkeley, or some other people, they'd speak, and there would be this big like riots and stuff, this kind of thing. And then it's progressed even further, and then that started happening in Canada, and it's like we're kind of mirroring what's happening in California. It's almost like California is like the litmus test of what could happen.
Well, I almost feel like right now it's what you're seeing in Europe is just going to be what we're going to see in major cities in the US, probably around election season. And then after what we see over here, you'll probably see up in Canada a little bit after, because it's almost like the same way we operate our proxy wars overseas, and we stage things in certain, you know, Eastern European countries just to see what a, you know, just to experiment what a conflict would look like between the US and Russia. We do that first. It's almost like they stage their state sanctioned protests and riots and everything over there first before it comes over here, because there's no possible way for all these protests and riots and social unrest, as they call them, to happen organically the same way across cultures, across the country, seemingly simultaneously. There's no way that this isn't something that they organize in order to just jam something down our throat and make you almost feel like you're afraid to step up or say anything against it. This is what the masses have already agreed to, because that's all you see in the media. That's what you see on the on your social media feed. That's what you see on the front page of CNN and everything. It's just, I don't believe it that this is just something that's like naturally occurring because people are upset about the climate or something. I think this is something that they very carefully plan out. Again, I'm starting to sound like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. But I mean, I see the protests in person here, and it's like, okay, so I'll be around downtown LA and see how bad it gets, and then I'll travel to like an affluent area like Calabasas, which, if you're unfamiliar with it, like it's like where the like near where Joe Rogan and the Kardashians and Kanye West, that's where they live. It's like the richer part of the area, and it's like, wait, how are they having protests the same way they're having protests in New York City? It makes no sense.
Yeah, like a stage, like people were bussed in for it. So like we recently had a protest. I went to the one in Vancouver. It was all the way across Canada. It was against the gender ideology in schools, and like teaching kids. The main crux of it was basically some of the provinces in Canada have been pushing measures to make it so it's illegal to do the gender ideology stuff with kids without parental consent. So like they can do it, but you have to go to the parents and you have to say your kid wants to identify as this other thing, right? And
which is crazy because they passed essentially the same rule over here in the U.S. and Florida, and they label it the "Don't Say Gay" bill, and they're starkly against it. But it's like it's doing essentially what you're talking about in Canada, and that's something sounds like something more than reasonable to say. Hey, let's loop in the parents because they're the parents.
right, right. The parents, I mean, you can't, like, I have two kids. And when my kids are at school, I can't send them to anything without parental consent.
Yes.
If I miss a signature, they're gonna miss that ski trip. They're gonna miss that whatever trip. But they want to say that kids can identify, dress a different way, even get to school, dress up and have a change of clothing so they can do another thing and keep the secret from the parents. Like they actually think that this is a normal activity for people. So we had these protests, and it took place all over Canada. It was called the Million March for Children, and it was over 78 cities, which for Canada is really big because I mean, we have what, 40 million people. It's tiny country compared to the U.S., but tons of people came out for this. But the counter protest was so shocking to me. It was evidently they had all of these trade unions get together, and they organized within the unions, not the trades workers, but the top brass in the unions all got together, and they had these secret meetings on Zoom. And we know this because somebody infiltrated it and made it public.
Oh, good.
And it went out that they were paying people to show up to these events and cause a ruckus. Now, I went to the Vancouver one, and it wasn't so bad. There was, the people on the parent side, they just kind of kept to their own, and the other people were just making a whole bunch of noise and coming out and saying some outrageous things like all cops are bastards, and the usual lefty stuff. And it's like they just can't help themselves when they get a microphone, kind of thing. And but it was absurd. Like, it was crazy to see in Canada. It was crazy to see in Canada what we've been seeing on the news coming out of the United States. Like, it's coming here.
And that's the thing, is you talk about how it was like some sort of paid for counter protest that was inorganic. And I remember, did you talk about the Nick Merckx Call of Duty thing at all?
Oh, so that only came up, like, I briefly mentioned it, but fill the audience in for this.
But okay, so there's this famous Call of Duty player, and he's like one of the top streamers, and he had in the video game, like, in store, like, you can play as him, which is a high honor if you're into the video game realm. So he's having kids, I think, around the Glendale area, which is a very predominantly Armenian area, which is going to be, their culture is a bit more traditional. So they're not going to be such fans of the LGBT community. And it's just because they're very, like, first generation immigrants. So they weren't a fan of the LGBT stuff really getting pushed in the Glendale school district. And Nick Merckx lives in there and just had a kid. So he's watching videos around the school district of these concerned parents saying, hey, there's been an LGBT flag at the school. There's been an LGBT teacher in the classrooms. Like, we haven't protested that, but now you're trying to push this curriculum towards the kids, and we just don't feel comfortable with that. And then randomly, people are getting in fist fights around the school, and there's brawls and everything. And for Nick Merckx to say, hey, I don't think that they should be doing that as a parent, have it be between the parents and the kids. People were calling for a boycott of Call of Duty. They were calling that, Infinity Ward, the controlling company, take down his special skin, and Call of Duty actually did it. But the crazy part is the more you looked into the protests of who was there to tell the Glendale parents, hey, we need to be able to show your kids explicit material, and it can be a secret from the parents. It was people not in the area, people that don't have kids, and some of them, the ones that are actually getting physically violent, some of them actually had a criminal history of crimes against kids in that very specific way. And it's almost like, how would he even know to go to some random school in the outskirts of Los Angeles County to protest this particular thing, unless it was like what you said, secret Discord servers or secret Zoom calls and meetings of like, oh yes, let's ship people from Portland, Oregon and Tacoma, Washington to go all the way down to Los Angeles, California to get in fist fights with people. So all of a sudden it looks like, oh my God, look at all these people over in California. They're phobic against our people. We need to fight for the rights for the T kids in that community. It's like, no, that's not what it was, but that's how it was painted. And that's how some guy lost a large large portion of what his business is streaming on Call of Duty, because now he has to transition to another video game, and it's almost like, yeah, it may seem insignificant. A video game loses his video game character in a thing, but it goes deeper than that, and it's almost like a concerted thing, because how is it happening in some random place with some random video gamer that I know about? How is it happening in other parts of LA? How is it happening in New York City? And all of a sudden now it's happening in other countries all across Canada for, what was it, the Million March for Children? I forget.
Yeah, that's right. It was the Million March for Children.
This is not organic, especially if they're paying for people to do it. And that's why I always think, whenever you get a massive protest, whether it's on for liberal concerns or conservative concerns, I forget what those guys are called, where they wear the masks and they have a Patriot Front. Whenever they wear masks, I don't believe it. I just don't believe this is an organic thing. I think this is just because you're shipping people in to paint a certain narrative, and it's suspect to say the least. And I always try to fight the fact that I'm a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, even though I sell one on my website and it's like my bestseller thing or whatever. But
That's hilarious.
But sometimes I feel like it fits, where it's like, yeah, it seems silly for me to think that they're bussing in people to go protest a court opinion or them not trying to show kids explicit materials in a school district. But I mean, prove it wrong. Show me how it's 100% not that, and I'll believe it. But for now, I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is definitely some concerted effort paid for by the World Economic Forum or something like that. Like, does it sound silly? Yes. Is there evidence? Yes. So, I mean, that's where I kind of sit on that.
I got to get me one of the tinfoil hats. I didn't know those existed. That's hilarious.
Yeah, you can just email me. I'll send one over if you would like one. These are people have actually been in my inbox saying, hey, is there any protective material in it? Like, is it? I'm like, no, it's just fabric. The only thing that protects you from is like people taking you seriously. And almost in a way, no, seriously, here's the thing, is like in my live streams that oftentimes disappear, and that's okay. I understand. The YouTube game is a YouTube game, whatever. But I'm like, if I'm going to talk about some wacky theory and I wear this hat, like, the wildfires over in Hawaii, and they're like, oh yeah, it was like lasers or whatever. If I'm talking about the story and I'm wearing a tinfoil beanie, nobody can clip that clip out of context and put it somewhere like, oh my God, Decoy voice, he's an idiot. He believes in space lasers or whatever. I'm like, I'm wearing a tinfoil beanie. Like, what do you think I'm doing? So it seems like a prop. It seems funny, but it's actually something that I legitimately I wear for protection now.
Oh, that's hilarious. Because, well, that was the first time I actually got chatting with you in your live stream when you were talking about the fires there, and also when the fires were happening in Canada. And there's a lot of concerns because a lot of those fires were started by people. Like, and no space lasers. I was thinking that. I mean, there's some people that think that, but no, like people were actually out there with incendiary devices and starting fires, or just like lighting fires up and blaming it on climate change, right?
And that's a crazy thing, is you look at the satellite image where it was like 7 fires starting simultaneously in different areas. It's like, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 because you're having arid, windy climate, but not across the country at the same time. And all of a sudden your prime minister immediately comes out and says, we need to start giving up some of your rights because of climate change. Like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here. But it might be a tinfoil hat theory to think that these people are state sponsored. But I mean, at this point in time, if they were, they're getting their money's worth. Yeah,
they're getting their money's worth. Well, they're using any adverse, weather related thing. We got a Hurricane Fiona, right? That hit the East Coast. It hit it pretty hard in Canada, and it's climate change, and then we have a particularly dry summer. I mean, we didn't even have that much of a particularly dry summer. We just had a lot more arson, and all of a sudden it's climate change.
It's high fires over in California. It's flooding in California. It's like the first It's like, it was crazy that I lived in LA and there was that big hurricane. I don't even remember what it was called, but everybody's freaking out because the media is amping it up, how it's going to be the first tropical cyclone to hit California for like over a decade or something. And it's like, no, but if you look back in time, it's cyclical. It hits us about every 50 years, and this is about time for us to hit it. It's like we're El Nino year instead of the La Nina year. So it's like, yeah, it was going to happen. It made sense. It wasn't near as bad as what they were trying to anticipate it being, but 2, they were already getting ahead of it. Like, oh my God, like we had all these fires, we had all this flooding, we're having this hurricane. Time to start giving us only electric vehicles by like 2026 in California. Like, wait, none of this is connected. This is actually something they could have predicted because that's just nature. And yet I'm starting to lose some of my rights because of fear mongering. And lots of my neighbors, and like I always try to be compassionate towards the liberals that fall for this is the current thing and they fear monger on social media, because in LA, I'd say 90% of my friends are like diehard, listen to whatever narrative hits the internet and they agree with it and they panic alongside of it. And it's just, it's kind of sad, but I mean, I understand how they get caught up with it because they don't want to spend all their time doing research on stuff or watching live streamers and stuff. So I get it, but it's like, it's crazy that they keep on going to it. They keep on using that cheap tactic, and it keeps on working.
It does keep on working. I'm just going to get into a couple of super chats that popped up here.
Yeah.
Just a dildo says for $5, don't come to Canada, Decoy. Do not come. And Penny D with a $20 super chat. Didn't say anything. Just a super chat. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, appreciate that.
But yeah, so we actually had similar situations in Canada. I mean, it didn't happen as badly in Canada as what happened in Hawaii. In Hawaii, it was a situation where they let it feels this way. I mean, people got their lasers and all that, the theories about that stuff, but there was strong winds. There was perfect environment for fires to occur from power lines being taken down, and then the winds carry the fire over to areas. But then you also have all these events that take place that just made it way worse. They kept the power on when the power lines were down. They shut the water off when people needed it to put the fires out. They blocked the roads so people couldn't get in or out. Like, these are all situations. The other one that really got me was the fact that the chief of police, I don't know if this is true. Can you confirm this? The chief of police.
Yeah, he is. He's Vegas.
He's the Vegas shooter chief of police. Like, at the same time when that weird one went down that was botched and nobody knows any of the details about.
Which is crazy because remember how like they said, oh, there was there's lots of questions about what happened over in Vegas, and they said, oh, there was a notepad in one of the pictures, and then they're like, oh, they never released what was on the notepad. And it's like, okay, maybe they said, I think they were trying to play it off like it was just like calculations, and that may be true. But after we've seen with all the leaks on the very recent incident with the trans person that went to the school, and that document leaked, how much they freaked out about that. It's like, oh no, these are very, very suspect things. And it's almost like, yeah, you almost want to throw on your tinfoil beanie because you're like, wait, this is crazy. But how much would we have not known about Hawaii if it wasn't for Twitter or Elon Musk's X.com or something, of people being able to share videos? Because I remember seeing all sorts of stuff about how like, oh yeah, it was a good rescue effort and they're doing their best. But then you see people online videoing, hey, they're putting up these giant, like not giant, like 5 foot tall walls so the media can't go over there. Some people use drones to go over the area to kind of record what's happening, and they took them down. And it's almost like, wait, they're trying to say it's for your safety, but why would a drone not be able to fly over an area? And then also, if there's this toxic particulate in the air, what is a 5 foot tall fence going to do to keep people safer? Like, none of it made sense whatsoever. And it's like, well, I wouldn't trust the authorities over there anyway, because if you recall what the mayor was saying about how they're going to preserve the property that was burned down, and then you dig up a little bit earlier on, he said, oh yeah, if there's a natural disaster, we can preserve that property, but then we can also use that property to build housing, and also that housing might become upscale hotels, because we don't want to identify what is a high-end high-rise building or something. It's like, wait, okay, this seems suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And who would cover it up best? Somebody that has probably one of the biggest, I don't want to say cover-ups necessarily, but one of the biggest incidents under their belt that we know nearly nothing about.
Yeah, it's just so weird that guy was put in position, and then this all goes down. And it just happens to be in a place, Lahaina, where, you know, the locals have not wanted to sell because it's their ancestral area, and it's passed down generation after generation. And there's so much pressure from billionaires to just sell and give us your land. And then this goes down, right? And I mean, who wouldn't think conspiratorially in this situation, right? All of these things, you check all the boxes. Like, it sounds like they let it happen.
Oh, 1 million, but like the simple fact that they they were trying to contact the people that were surviving because so many people were displaced. So then they gave some BS like, oh, $700 for the people if your home was burned down, but also you need to register yourself on this list so we can locate you. And it's like, wait, so now they need to know who the survivors are. And then they found out that later on, when people were trying to evacuate, the police were boxing them in, and only if you had a 4x4 truck you could have escaped and survived, or if you jumped in the ocean and hung out on a surfboard and like, you know, in a, I don't know what it was, a hurricane or something, but like you basically had to fend for yourself, and the authorities were making it so you were going to lose your life. The last remaining people, now they want to document where you are, and you can't go back to your home. And also the media is going to kind of block out all coverage of what's really happening over there. And also they're blocking the relief efforts. Like I don't know if you saw the videos of other parts of Hawaii trying to get in supplies, and they said, "Oh no, you're not a part of the Red Cross. You're not a part of the official FEMA relief efforts. So the fuel, antibiotics, the food, like all the clean water, you can't bring it in because you're not the official relief efforts." And it's like, no, there's something terribly wrong with this. It's not a conspiracy theory to bring it up. It's a conspiracy theory when they shut you down for bringing it up, which we were.
Well, and that's the thing. So we had a similar situation in Canada, obviously not on such a grand scale with such valuable properties, but there was a, excuse me, a similar situation in Canada in an area called the Shuswap in this past summer, where it was just really weird what was going on with the police and how they were shutting down people's efforts to save their homes, telling them they had to evacuate. And then ones that did not evacuate, they were shutting them down, telling them to stay in their homes, and they couldn't even put fires out outside of their house. I did a short on this. I'll show you this and just get your reaction to it. Make sure that you're, yeah, there we go. I'll just show you this here real quick. The people of Shuswap, British Columbia, Canada are no strangers to fighting wildfires on their own, but this time they've been met with RCMP blockading the roads.
So I'm going to be arrested if I go across that bridge? Why are we wasting these resources right now on this?
That's just the way it is.
Like, you don't understand. Like, yeah, save your house, but when that bush is behind and I can run out there with a shovel and buckets of water and put out 30 spot fires in a day, when I
save that old lady's house,
I can save 10 people's houses.
Not only have they restricted their travel, but in some areas they've shut off the Pierre Polly. Oh, sorry. The people of Shuswap, British Columbia. They basically they stopped them from being allowed to even get water at that point. So they shut off the water mains so that they couldn't even fill up trucks. I heard stories of people filling a truck full of water and then driving through, the cops stopping them and getting them to drain all the water out before they could continue. Like this kind of stuff. It's ridiculous, right?
And it's real and it's happening, but I mean, on a base level with someone that's not looking to into things like you or is a fan of you and watching what you cover, if you just told it to a local person at the bakery or somebody at a coffee shop, they'd be like, you're a conspiracy theorist. The police aren't out there to help houses burn down, but I mean, we kind of have evidence that it is that way, and they're really not doing anything to dispel those rumors. How they dispel those rumors is they shut you down from talking about it, and that is something that makes it a even scarier thing, or a scarier idea, at least in my perspective.
What I'm really jealous of the United States is this this don't take my rights sort of approach to things. I think there's so much more fervor coming out of the United States because of that. Maybe it's because of the history of 1776 and the Constitution, how it was ratified and all of this. But in Canada, it seems to be a lot more of a population that are happy to be pushed over. Maybe more of a California type population. Maybe there's similarities there.
In certain spots of the country, they're more focused on our autonomy and our freedom. I'm telling you right now, in LA, there were so many people that were almost relieved at the idea that we were locking down, or relieved at the idea that we had to mask up to go to a restaurant, even though we could take it right off after that. Like, there is a huge element, at least in these deep blue pockets of the country, that they love it. They want to be locked down. They want to be controlled. They want to be like a lot of elements in Canada, where you're saying, oh, they're more submissive. It's like, nah, it's like that. And the bizarre thing is, though, is it's like, what you're describing over in Canada. I remember during the lockdowns, I would be in Los Angeles County, and then I had family that lived in a couple counties away, and I would go to my nephew's like Little League games, and it's crazy. Where I live, everybody's masked up and locked down, and nobody goes anywhere. I went like an hour and 40 minutes away, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm living in Texas. I'm living in Florida. No one's wearing masks. The kids are outside playing together. It is an entirely different world. So it's like, yeah, there's pockets that are going to be freedom based, but there's also, I don't know why, there are pockets of people that are very afraid of things and very willing to give up their rights because they're promised safety by Big Daddy government. Very bizarre to me, at least.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know what stems it. I don't know what puts people in a position where they, because I'm more of the freedom oriented, like, leave me alone. I'm just gonna do my thing. You do your thing. You stay over there, and I think it's just won't have a problem.
Having years and years of being coddled, where they they grow up in a, I would say, conservative part of the country, where like these suburbs in California where they're very conservative and they have law enforcement departments that can actually enforce a law and they can do stuff. They're raised in those areas. They go to these hyper liberal colleges when they turn 20, and all of a sudden they get inundated with like, oh no, everything you were raised to believe is bad. That's why we have all these problems right now. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, well, I never had a problem with safety growing up, so let me go ahead and give all those rights away because I was told, and it's trendy to think that those things were bad, and somehow feel better about themselves by saying, oh yeah, we got to dismantle law enforcement. We have to make sure that we have a little passport that says, hey, I got this medication, now I can get a cheeseburger from McDonald's. Like, they somehow think that's their virtuous thing, and they're excited to do it because somehow it was just put in their mind that this is the more virtuous thing to do. This is you're on the right side. You're not a spooky conspiracy theorist. You're not a MAGA Republican. You're compassionate because you're saving grandma. Like, they're very easily spooked, and it's sad.
So my thought's always been because what is it? The socialists, the Marxists in Europe, they were able to divide people up because of their in Europe there was always like a caste sort of system. There was at least the remnants of it. Like, even in England, you could go to different neighborhoods and people have different accents based on their like class status. And so Marxism really worked well in Europe because of this. Now in North America, we're all just kind of frontierists, from the get-go, and it's like, everybody's sort of a, incidentally embarrassed millionaire potentially, right? You could be a millionaire tomorrow. We don't buy into this class struggle. I'm not part of one class or another class, but they found their inroad with race and identity, and this has become like a big thing. And I've seen it out of the United States. I always, for a long time, because I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is like largely a hub, multicultural hub. And I mean, people from everywhere in the world I grew up with. So, I mean, I didn't know what racism was until people told me what racism was. We just we all hung out. But then it became this thing because in the 90s, nobody cared about it. And then all of a sudden, you can't live life without looking through the racial lens. And it's a way to divide people up. But like, it's become such a problem in society that everything has become about race, even to the point where you can't do philanthropy without being labeled a racist, right? And I'm talking about the new news with what's Mr. Beast. That's it. So like,
I think that it's coincidental that I think Tim Pool pointed out first, at least to me, where the year where they have Occupy Wall Street, where all the classes were getting together saying, oh my God, it's not my black neighbor that's holding me back. It's this rich capitalist banker that, got bailed out during the economic crisis. Wall Street is the problem. And then the year after all those protests happened, boom, racism was there. Oh my God, it was, I think it was Trayvon Martin was the first thing that everybody was marching for. Then it was George Floyd, where they found out a way where you could have elite sponsored protests. Oh my God, you guys are the good guys. If I shop on, I don't know if it's Target or whatever, you shop on Target or Walmart or whatever fancy store, they have their own Black Lives Matter banner and they have their section. Like, they can get behind it, even though they're in part of like the ones that are making the economy terrible. They're holding certain races down. Like, it's it should be a class thing, but they made it a race thing because then they can get us all kind of distracted and chasing our own tails. That whole scenario with the Mr. Beast thing where he's feeding or he's giving clean water to how many was like 300 villages over in Africa.
Excuse me, it was 100. Sorry, I got a cough. I got a cold
100
this
villages
week.
in Africa. But
so I have the video
how,
up here. So this was the video that he posted, and he built 100 wells in Africa. He brought clean drinking water to 100 different villages, and immediately people are on there saying Mr. Beast 100 wells is disrespect to Africans. Like what? What the hell?
Well, it's crazy because now that person has actually openly said that they'd rather let Africans die of thirst than the narrative shift a little bit. And it's like, yeah, they're actually putting people's lives below wokeness and intersectionality. It's crazy. Like they want to be able to dunk on white people, but they don't care if a couple of Africans die of thirst. It's atrocious, but it's real.
It's absurd. I mean, here's Yahoo News saying while American YouTuber Mr. Beast's goal was to provide clean drinking water to 500,000 people, activists say his actions shamed the Kenyan government and helped perpetuate the stereotype that Africa is dependent on handouts.
And it's funny because it's like, okay, Yahoo News is trying to go out there and simp for the Kenyan government, but it's like how many times, I don't know if it's Kenya's government, but I know it's Nigeria's government because I have a friend that's Nigerian he's like, it was a first generation when he's only been here for a year, but the idea that he's like, their government is famous for their politicians pretending to faint when they steal money from the people, or like, they disappear, but all of a sudden they put in like a body impersonator to be their new president. Like that's what they're known for. So why is Yahoo News trying to cover for a government that's consisted of shady politicians that steal money from their people and also shady political parties that replace their leaders with stand-in clones? Like it sounds crazy, but that's exactly what's happening. And here we have Yahoo News saying we need to get the white guy so bad that we're willing to stand up for literal con artists that are harming their people. This is nuts.
It is nuts. I mean, it's been a long-standing thing. I can't remember who coined this, but they said, foreign aid is poor people in rich countries giving money to rich people in poor countries, and they don't give it to any of their people. So any of that aid that goes there, we got a rich philanthropist who's just like, I'm gonna just go above and beyond and do this. He actually wrote on Twitter, I already know I'm gonna get canceled because I uploaded a video helping people, and to be 100% clear, I don't care. I'm always going to use my channel to help people, to inspire my audience to do the same. I grew a ton of respect for Mr. Beast. Before this, I didn't even know who I knew who he is, right? But I just thought he was like a sensational guy, and that's all he was after.
He was, yeah.
But he seems legit. Like to hear that, that gives me like a whole new earned respect for the guy.
Well, he's doing the right thing, but he's also doing what is actually the safe thing. Like before, as a mainstream celebrity like Mr. Beast is, it was safer to like coddle to the crying babies that are in your comment section saying, "Oh my God, you're harming the Kenyan government. You're perpetuating white stereotypes." It's like, no, if you start to cater to that audience, you're never going to be able to retain them because there's always going to be something different. If it wasn't him digging these wells, it was going to be him curing blindness for all these people. And what was it? Hassan Piker, I believe it was trying to criticize him for doing like, "Oh my God, how dare you?" And it's like, wait, these are the same group of people that will criticize Mr. Beast for being a rich guy and digging wells for kids dying of thirst in Africa, but then also they'll cry when Elon Musk used billions of dollars to buy Twitter. No matter what, they're going to criticize you on if you use your money to save free speech, you use your money to dig wells. But if you're a white guy and you use your money to buy mega yachts like Leonardo DiCaprio and Jeff Bezos, but if you happen to own the Washington Post to push your own narrative, apparently they don't really protest Jeff Bezos as much as they would be upset about a Mr. Beast or Elon Musk. So it's like, yeah, don't bother catering to that audience that's always going to cry that you're saving people and giving people the gift of vision. F them. Like just they're always going to cry about something new. So it's like, yeah, I'm glad that Mr. Beast is taking what is the neo safe way, which is almost like being a Donald Trump of sorts. If your haters hate you, just lean into them hating you. Say, I don't care. I'm doing what I'm doing, because otherwise, why bother? Why bother trying to get someone that is so emotionally unable to comprehend good things for the sake of preserving, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or the Kenyan government in this argument that I mean, it's just ridiculous. You can never make them happy.
No, you can't. And it's funny because like the people that are criticizing, you bring a Hassan Piker. I mean, he's a devout socialist. He talks about socialism all the time, but he makes so much money off of people selling socialism.
Yes.
What has he redistributed from his wealth? I mean,
but if anything, he's teaching these socialist kids or socialist students that is his audience what socialism really is. It's not everybody gets a piece of it. It's like you get one or two people up top that live in mega mansions in LA while everybody else is poor. And I think I think it's bizarre enough that people like me and you will get super chats because it's just like, oh yeah, we're producing content, we're talking to people. I don't think they get anything extra out of the super chat, but they just like to support us. But the thing is, though, is we're not sitting here saying, hey, this is why you need to give more. This is why you need to deserve less. While we sit in mega mansions eating, fancy meals, while we're like multi-millionaires buying, I forgot what supercar he purchased that he was bragging about. And it's like, yeah, good on him. He's working hard. He's being able to buy I forgot what Ferrari, I don't know what car it was, but just the idea that, but he did it saying we should have less. You should have less. How dare you not actually give all of your income to the government to redistribute to the people that aren't producing anything? Like it's just, it's a grift. But I mean, at this point in time, I almost respect it. Like you're taking money from all these low information people that are witnessing you with immense levels of wealth, and them at not, and yet they still gave money to him. Why wouldn't you? If you're doing it, why would you? Why would you give up that gift? Why would he? Well, yeah. Why would he willingly put himself back at Burger King, or not back at Burger King? Why would he make himself go work a minimum wage job when he can become a millionaire peddling BS? I'll never understand.
Well, he got it from his cousin, right? His cousin Cenk, the Young Turks guy.
And it's funny because did you see the video recently of, is it Cenk or Sank or whatever his name is, him going on Piers Morgan Uncensored, and the guy was calling him out for, it's like, oh yeah, you're just against that particular religion, you don't actually care about the issues because this has been happening for a while. And Cenk got so upset of him being called out for his nonsense, he just started shouting, bigot, you're racist, and he just kept on saying that over and over. And I'm like, wait, dude, like they're so programmed to use these like liberal keywords as like Harry Potter spells, where it's like, oh, if you're making a good point and I just say, hey, Clyde, you're a racist, you usually can't say anything. Oh, wait, I don't want to be a racist. I'm a white man. I can't say anything against that. So it's like a Harry Potter spell. I was able to silence you because those are the rules. You can't be racist. You can't be a bigot. You can't be a MAGA Trump supporter because that makes you a bad person. Therefore, you have to shut up. And it's like, it's crazy that that mentality has made these gentlemen rich beyond their imagination. And it's not because of, they're in some corporation. It's because of people crowdfunding this nonsense.
Yeah, it was sad because it's making people callous at the end of the day. Like, people are becoming more callous when it comes to race relations and stuff, where I think it shouldn't even be an issue. I mean, like, I thought we largely got past it. And
well, they've made people callous, where before they had to call you a racist and you shut up, but now then they said, oh, you're a bigot, and later on they said, oh no, you're a white nationalist. Like, if you watch anything that Biden's doing, he no longer says, hey, you're being racist. He says you're a white nationalist, because racist has almost zero value now. Like, if you call like, what is it? I forgot what news outlet says. Bird watching is racist. Sleep is racist. It's like, no, we just tune it out because it's just been used too much. So it's like, yeah, at one point in time, I didn't want to be called a racist, but at this point in time, if the media calls me a bad person, or one of Hassan's buddies did a video about me, I'm like, yeah, he's calling me all these negative things, but I've, like, what is the Rick and Morty thing? It's like, I've seen what you cheer for. You booze me nothing. And it's like, yeah, I'm glad you don't like me. If you like me, then I'm doing something terribly wrong,
Well, that's a fair point. And the funny part about that car that he bought, it wasn't a Tesla. That's for sure. It wasn't for someone who's like really like, oh, we got to protect the environment. You got a gas guzzling sports car. Why not the Tesla?
Because his people will never call him out for it, which is the funny thing. It's like they agree with everything he says. He's always angry about it, but it's like, he'll never walk the walk with his thing. He'll never actually like embrace any of his ideals or things he's trying to push his listeners to doing, because his listeners are never going to call him out for it, because at least at some level they know this is what socialism is about. It's not about fixing any of these problems. It's just making people feel better about it, and then saying, oh well, you know, we have leaders that are rich and wealthy and they're the ones that are exempt from all the rules that they're imposing on us, but that it's better somehow.
Well, they always wrap it up in these like this malarkey. I mean, like at the end of the day, what I like to do is bring things down to first principles, right? So socialism for me is the abolition of private property. Like at the end of the day, that's what it is. That's what they're advocating for. Whether it's right away or in a roundabout way, it's you don't have property. And in Canada, we have politicians that openly say, in Canada, you don't ultimately have a right to property. That's terrifying.
Crazy.
That's
Crazy.
absolutely terrifying. That was our former attorney general, by the way. That's like,
Jesus.
yeah. So this is terrifying. And we have pushes for that in the free world. We call America the free world. I mean, like that's at the end of the day, if America isn't the place to flee to, where does anyone go? I mean, I think I'm paraphrasing Reagan at this point, where he was
there's that quote where they say, if all of a sudden U.S. loses their rights or we go to war with somebody, no one's airdropping us ammunition, no one's coming to save us, no one's, you know, mass tragedy happens in the world, America sends a super carrier over there to help take care of them. If the U.S. goes under, that's it. There's nothing else. And now we have our people electing people that care more about other countries and their stripping of democracy than actually preserving our own. And it's a scary thing. But yeah, no, it's if we go under, no one's coming to save us in the U.S. I think if Canada starts becoming very totalitarian, I could see, you know, the U.S. helping out with that a bit. Actually, we were with the Canadian convoy, right?
Well, I mean, so there was like moral support in that whole thing, but I don't know if do you know what ended up happening with the convoy?
I think they ended up winning, as far as I know, where it was like they weren't able to actually say, oh, you have to get the doses to go through the border. Like I remember it was piling up over in the U.S. and they couldn't come in and out, but then eventually that went away.
So what happened with the convoy was actually really egregious, because they had so much support from the Canadian public on this, and they were openly defying what the government wanted, and it was on the world stage, and it actually got people all over the world to question their governments and what they were doing. But to stop it, there was no line of dialogue between the convoy participants and the government. They tried every avenue except to talk to them. So they were going after them, and then at one point the Prime Minister of Canada declared basically it used to be the War Measures Act, and they renamed it to the Emergencies Act. So what essentially it did was it suspended all civil liberties in Canada nationwide.
Jesus.
In order to go after these protesters, and they went in with cavalry, literally cavalry, and jackboots, and they beat up people on the streets and took all their property. Not only that, they took economic measures against these people, and they anyone who was, you know, had sort of known to be a leadership role, they suspended all of their financial institutions. They froze all of their bank accounts, and they made it so that they couldn't pay their bills. And they promised, oh, this was only until you're out, but no, it was punishment for them. They left their bank accounts frozen for weeks on it. People weren't able to pay their mortgage, or their children weren't able to eat. It was terrible what the example the Canadian government proved that they would do. And then later, a judge, a Trudeau appointed judge, was the one who reviewed the whole thing and said, yeah, it was totally fine. I'm glad that he did that. And that's where it's at.
Oh, I thought at some point in time, because I know I had a friend trying to get me to travel to go to Canada with him next time he goes, and he's like, oh, I was like, well, I can't enter Canada because of my medical status. I would medicate. Well, I don't know if we can even say it on live stream.
I think it's over. It's fine. Yeah.
The thing is, though, is they say, oh no, you can. You don't need to have your doses. You can go over there. It's perfectly fine now. So from my perspective, I just thought that at some point in time, the Canadian truckers had won because they had repealed pretty much all of the restrictions that had once been imposed on the truckers. That's why they didn't want to. They were protesting. But I knew about, like, the cavalry trampling that old woman at the protest. I knew about them taking away the firewood and the gasoline and locking all the GoFundMes and their accounts and everything. But I was under the assumption that they had eventually won. I didn't know that was something that the government just kind of upheld. But at least from my understanding is right now you guys have a very conservative person that's polling much better than Trudeau. Hopefully that'll be the outcome from all of this.
We're all hoping for that. The media is absolutely corrupt in the country. So I mean, it's not much different than watching CNN or MSNBC, that kind of thing. But this is what the boomers all get to see, and a lot of the boomers are actually turning to channels like mine to get news in Canada, because there's not a lot of news sources in this country, even on the independent side. Well, we have a small demographic, right?
Yeah, well, it's just crazy for me to think about, like, my girlfriend's parents, boomers, but they were very conservative, which is odd because all their children like hyper liberal. But just the idea that they would watch Fox News for Tucker Carlson. Like, whenever I went to her house, they were watching Tucker Carlson on TV. But once that disappeared and he ended up on Twitter later on, I was thinking, oh, the boomers are just going to end up watching the rest of Fox Business, which is like Hannity and I think all the other garbage personalities they have over there, or CNN or something. But oddly enough, all these older people are latching on to channels like mine, where it's like several of my former employees have talked about their fathers being big fans of my channel because they feel like it makes them connected to what's happening in the world. And I'm like, that's such a bizarre way for people to jump from saying, oh, they like Tucker Carlson and stuff, that you would think they would go to the next TV personality that just takes up that time slot. But no, they're actually opting out and saying, hey, even at the most detached from the internet mindset, they still know they're watching state-sponsored media. They still know CNN is just peddling garbage because they see the difference between how they try to paint what's happening in the world and how the real world actually looks when they look outside. So it's kind of good the way that this is, where you're getting, boomers watching you for news in Canada, and I'm getting just regular people in LA saying, oh, no, we don't trust Fox News anymore.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And it used to be the liberals didn't trust Fox News. Now it's just everybody doesn't trust Fox News.
Oh, it's crazy how much every single one of the outlets almost in unison will use the same verbiage for the same thing as soon as it pops out. And it's like, tell me that's not something coming from one source giving them their marching orders. And whenever they need to change their mind about something, in unison over here in the US, they all turned against Biden almost simultaneously. And it's like, okay, they finally got their marching orders to say Biden's not the one for 2024, but let's just slowly introduce this until it's time for them to put in California Governor Gavin Newsom, which is a train wreck in itself. But I mean, at least I feel like it's easier to defeat a Newsom than oddly enough, a Michelle Obama. Even though it sounds dumb, we're a country that loves reality television. The liberals would love a Michelle Obama, I think.
Oh, they would eat that up because, it checks a lot of boxes, the intersectionality boxes. You got black, woman, some might tick the tranny box. I don't know. If the rumors, I don't think the rumors are true, but
that's the thing is, like, we have no idea about any of her political stances whatsoever, but we know what gets them activated. Oh my God, she has a great story. She has a great look. She can talk well. Like, I think that I even saw a cooking show with her and puppets, and it's like, yeah, my girlfriend loves cooking shows, but she was watching them. I'm like, oh yeah, she has a very good way of presenting, and I'm like, that was kind of like how Obama was. Obama was just what I'd say, like a kindergarten teacher. Like, he would talk to his listeners like it was a kindergarten class, and he's reading them a book. Hey guys, like, look at this, and I do that, and it's like, yeah, they don't think that he had scandals, but it's like because they didn't look into what he was actually doing as president. And I'm like, yeah, that's all they want. They just want someone to treat them like a kindergarten teacher and check all those boxes that makes them feel like less of a racist, and they vote for him. And it's like, how did we get to this point right now? That much, that level of low information voter where they voted for Hillary Clinton because it was her turn. It was time to have a female president. Like that is just sheer absurdity. But
Well,
I
that's
mean,
how we got Trump, because it was
Yeah.
absurd. It was absurd that she was just gonna. It was just her turn, like it's some sort of dynasty to be handed off.
Oh, yeah, 1,000,000%. Like I think it's crazy how people were on such of the Biden train of like, oh yeah, let's get the adults back in charge. Let's get someone that's going to be not a racist like Trump. And it's like, good God, have you seen what Biden did?
Biden was
as
a
senator?
big racist. He was huge.
Huh?
He was a huge racist, wasn't he?
He's a huge racist. Like there's so many things he did to the black community, setting them back alongside Kamala Harris, who it boggles my mind that she initially was painted as an Asian American, like an Indian. She was an Asian American. And then when it came time where BLM was huge and Biden needed a black female to run alongside him, they started saying, oh, she's African American, even though she's Indian. And I believe that her other parent is Afro-Caribbean, which isn't black. It's like Dominican, I guess you could say. They look like African Americans, but they're not. They're Dominican. They're Afro-Caribbean. So suddenly, all the mainstream media started to say, "Oh yes, he's the first African American vice president." It's like she's not African American. Like,
No.
where are we getting that from? But it's just because the voters are so stupid, they'll just eat it up. They're like, "Oh yeah, cool. We have this right now," despite the fact that she, as I believe it was the attorney general in California, what was her position? I forget. But just the idea that she had openly talked about locking up people for marijuana offenses and using them as cheap labor in the prison system, despite the fact she would later brag about using marijuana at the time that she was locking up people for using marijuana. It's like, she did terrible things to the African American community, and somehow they embraced her alongside of someone that used to call Joe Biden used to call the African American community, oh, watch out for the super predators, or he didn't want his kids to be in racial jungles in school with African Americans. It's like this. That's how low information they are. Like that boggles my mind.
It was literally like a slavery like camp that she was running.
Well, and that's the thing is I forget what it was. It was like the Grand Cyclops of the KKK or something. Like he spoke at his I forget what it is. You can look it up. It's like it was somebody in the KKK.
Cyclops. That's funny. If that's what it's actually called, that's really funny.
Because they have the Grand Wizard, and I think that one of the lieutenants is that. But it's like someone that was high in the organization, the KKK, passed away. Oh yeah, he spoke at, I believe it was his eulogy. He was there at, and it's like, wait. If Trump did this, the media would be all over it. But since Biden did it, I mean, let's just kind of sweep this quietly under the rug. He wasn't actually the Grand Cyclops. He was something. It's like, oh, this is nonsense. Like,
you know what's funny though is like people forget the history. The Ku Klux Klan was the militant wing of the Democrat Party.
Yes,
like that's the history of the Democrat Party. And
I was always not raised on, but I was always told, at least here, that the parties had switched magically, like, oh, at some point in time. But I believe it was PragerU had done a breakdown saying, yeah, they talk about the parties being switched, but they're saying none of the people switched parties when they relabeled it. There was no like they were the small government one. It's like, no, the parties never switched. Like that's just some rumor they tell themselves so they can feel like they're on the right side and they're the ones standing up for the little guy. But it's like, I think that you have a lot of people arguing online saying, hey, if your people have been voting down ballot for a specific party this entire time, and yet you guys are still complaining about the same problems right now, maybe they're not the ones that are trying to dig you out of these issues. Maybe they're actually inflicting you with these issues so they can keep on campaigning on these issues. And you guys are just being duped into easy, low information votes. And I think that we're starting to see that with, all the intersectionality, the race-based voting, and also like, what was it? If you're familiar with the Roe v. Wade situation that happened over in the U.S. recently, a lot of those, to their credit, young women in college were starting to notice, like, hey, look, they're trying to fundraise on this and trying to get us to vote for more Democrats, but they controlled the House for however many years. They have the presidency, and they never codified it. They had the opportunity to solidify these rules for us. They never did, and now that we're losing this privilege, they get to get more votes and they get to get more money from us. Like this, none of this makes sense. And I'm like, oh, cool. These people are starting to not be so low information because the answers are right in front of them, saying, oh, it's not about actually solving your problems. It's about campaigning and fundraising on your problems and just leaving you out to dry because they don't actually do anything for you, even though they're supposed to be the party for like the little guy, the average person. But it's just not the case.
Well, it's crazy because like historically, I mean, Lincoln, people don't realize like he was a Republican. He was like the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. And they ran on emancipation of the slaves. Like this is the history of it, and nothing switched except the narrative at one point.
Yes.
And they switched. They went from Jim Crow, who was a Democrat. We all know about Jim Crow laws in the South, and that was awful, segregation and all of these things. And then fast forward today, and now it's all the Republicans that are supposed to be the racists, even though they were the ones to have like the first black people in office and all these other things, right?
Oh yeah, I think that even trying to say something about that that the what was it? I forget what it was, but they're trying to say it was like the first black female appointed to, I forget what was the position. It's a large one. I'm feeling stupid for not knowing it off the top of my head, but they kept on trying to say, oh, it's the first black female in the position, but they're like, wait, there's one African-American male already in that position. Like, one African-American female already in that position. She just happens to be a Republican. You guys are like 30 years behind them, and yet you just don't want to count her because she doesn't believe with you, your ideologies. It's just ridiculous. But I mean, I think that it was a big red pill moment for a lot of people right now, where they said they'll subscribe to the idea of, oh yeah, the parties had switched, but it's like, do you realize like right now the Democrats are trying to say this was a Republican effort to defund the police, the Republican notion to defund the police. They were trying to do it. And it's like they're switching it in front of our faces. And I'm like, I wholeheartedly believe that at some point in time in my lifetime, they're going to switch it around to say, oh, the vaccines were a Republican motion because it was Donald Trump, Operation Warp Speed. He was the one pushing it, and he was trying to force everybody to get it, despite the fact that, this was been top to bottom Republican states versus Democrat states in terms of forcing you to get the doses. But the idea that when it's convenient, they're just going to change the narrative. And unfortunately, a lot of their voters will be low information enough to just believe them. Just like, okay, cool. Yeah, the Republicans were trying to defund the police. That makes sense. Villainize them. They're terrible,
Well, I do recall a lot of criticism of Trump from the right saying like, he did push a lot for the vaccines. But he always did say that, well, we're pushing for it, but it's ultimately your choice. They're not going to coerce anybody into this stuff. That was a left-wing thing. And in Canada, it was absolutely absurd. The level of coercion that they put on people. I mean, vaccine passports, people had to carry around, or like on their phone, they had to have a QR code that they would scan so you could go to restaurants and stuff like that. And I mean, it was really horrible. In some provinces, it got to the point where people weren't even allowed to go to like family gatherings where
and that's the crazy thing is it didn't happen with my social groups as much because my friends are more a little bit like, they're more like me. But I know certain people, like my girlfriend, for instance, where a lot of her friends essentially cut them out of their lives because she hadn't had the doses. And it's like, wait, what? Because somebody told you that this was dangerous, you guys are all starting like a new thing and moving on. And then later on, as things have died out, now they want to apologize. Hey, look, everybody, just have some compassion with us. We were scared these people were losing their lives. And it's like, what? You guys got the TV to tell you that we can't be friends anymore. And it's almost like it's always going to be like a scar on their friendship. And it's kind of sad, but it's like in LA, just like what you guys have over in Canada, where all the restaurants I went to, all the shopping malls and stuff, they had signage saying, oh, we're going to check you for your card or whatever. And I remember going there and I'm like, okay, we need your vaccine card so you to be seated here. And I'm like, oh, I don't got it. I'm like, okay, we'll seat you then. It's like, yeah, because nobody wants to enforce it. Like, they've been told to do it, but it's like, I don't think anybody, like, they didn't want to deal with somebody that was going to give them pushback because, why? You know what I mean? Like, it was sad. Like, I remember there's certain places right now that demand to have masking, and it's like, what? We're in 2023. Like, you want me to have a mask to walk into your restaurant to, like, sit down with it? I'm like, I'm just not going to eat here. Like, you guys are asking for it. It's ridiculous. Move my business elsewhere because I know everywhere is struggling. So if you're going to turn your nose up at somebody that doesn't want to give you your security blanket in your restaurant, then you deserve to go out of business at this point.
They were getting ready to put people on cattle cars in Canada. It was ridiculous. They were actually having debates on the House floor, in the House of Parliament, saying like, what do we do with these people? There were legitimately 6 million people refused to get the vaccines in the country.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, out of 40 million people, that's a huge amount of people. And they're like, what do we do with these
in
people?
Australia? Like, they did do the cattle cars over there.
Yeah, they did, and that's absurd. It's absurd that we live in a time where this is something that people were willing to go along with.
And the craziest thing is, you knew what it was about because none of the stuff they did was consistent. Like, they have the they don't call them internment camps, but the camps they built, the hotels they built, it's like, yeah, they had end dates of 2023 back in 2020. And it's like, okay, so you guys don't think this is just going to be a thing that's happening. This is going to be permanent, and you need these high capacity buildings for these people to go to. And then you had stories like where kids got exposed to it, but they weren't sick, so they put them in the camps. And when they escaped the camps, like, they hopped the fence or crawled under it, and they got away. Like, they didn't get to civilization. They were still in the wilderness. They caught them, put them back in the camps, and say, okay, now because for your transgressions, you just added 2 weeks to your quarantine. It's like, wait, I thought this was about sickness, and now you're punishing us with longer stays. And then you later on had these social media influencers coming out saying, oh, it's not that bad, guys. We got good food. There's sexy girls here. Like, everybody should want to come to these camps. And it's like, do you know the basketball player from the Golden State Warriors, Andrew Bogut?
No, I don't, but
he's the Australian guy, but he was like, yo, I'll tell you right now, the media has come out to me to say, we'll give you this much money and we'll give you a press pass so you can have your freedom if you just post on your social media saying, hey, lockdown, it's for everybody's safety. So it's like, they'll give him his freedom because he's a celebrity as long as he pushes everybody else get locked down. And, you know, good on him. He actually went out there and exposed it. But it's crazy that this really happened, and now you're starting to see people deny that it happened. You guys were never locked down. You guys are exaggerating. There was no QR code for you to enter buildings or go to grocery stores. That never happened. It's like, it did. It was getting close, but then there was enough people that rejected it. And sad to say, even though he's unpopular right now, I think the U.S. has Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis to thank for most of our freedoms in the time that it happened, because it's like, yeah, people think Texas Governor Greg Abbott does good things because he's a Republican. it's Texas, but it's like, no. Abbott was throwing business owners in jail too because of lockdowns, and the only one that actually, you know, I don't want to say had the balls to do it, but he actually just took the calculated risk to say, hey, let's reopen. Because if all of a sudden Florida reopened and you had 50% mortality rates, he can never walk in the streets ever again in his life. He actually put that on his back, and he actually reopened, and then other Republican governors followed suit, and then eventually places like California had to do it too. But it's like, yeah, without somebody like DeSantis, we never would have reopened. But then I've been watching his campaign for president right now, and it's been abysmal to say the least.
Oh, DeSantis? Yeah, I mean, it would be good to see him stay in Florida as the governor and then keep going with that. But so in Canada, Florida, and the third world were sort of the litmus test for all of us. Because we looked at Florida, for example. They didn't do any of the lockdowns, and they were fine. And then we have this disease that's going to kill us all. Well, who's going to get hit the worst? The third world, where, you know, disease will fester, and they don't have the infrastructure, and they don't have the stuff, they don't have all the supplies, so people will get hurt. And it turns out they were doing just fine. So
yeah,
what do you even think about that?
And even like the tinfoil hat theories of the leaders in Africa that did not accept the doses, they were just mysteriously coming up missing. They were losing their lives. It was weird. And then also, what was the other country that was taking doses? I believe it was India, was taking doses. And then one of the large pharmaceutical companies tried to say, hey, come get it over here. And they said, okay, we want to have our own independent trials on it. And then instead of getting their billions of customers, potential customers, they said no. It's like, wait, they can't have an independent study on the effectiveness of your medicine? And then they turn that down. And it's like, yo, that's just downright scary to me.
Sketchy, for sure.
But yeah, no, it's like I had, like I said, one of the guys that's been on my channel, he's straight from Nigeria. And I was like, okay, so is it really impacting you guys over there? It's like, no, not really. And, one of the things that it may be, and we can't confirm it, but the idea that over in countries like Nigeria, they have to treat I believe it's malaria constantly. So they have huge amounts of what they were calling horse goo, but they have huge amounts of it because they take it almost as a prophylactic because it's like, yeah, it's such a big deal over there. So they constantly have the system. It's like, okay, so maybe it was helping them not get serious cases of this. And then you got to think about, in LA at least, we have this huge homeless population out there. I was dealing with them constantly at my old career, and it's like they're dirty, they have no hygiene, they never wear masks, and they're constantly doing terrible things to their lungs. It's a respiratory virus.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking we'd have like 90% mortality rates with them. Oh, they weren't getting impacted at all.
Oh, wow.
It's like, oh, okay, so maybe there's something iffy about what's happening right now.
Oh, wow. I want to talk about the presidential campaign. What's your takes on it? So, I mean, at this point, I don't know if there's going to be a nomination for the Democrats because, I mean, some people are calling for it, but essentially Joe Biden is scheduled to be the incumbent candidate for president in the next one because he won fair and square apparently, yeah. And so now it's basically a race for who's going to get the silver prize. Like what is this? It looks like Trump's got 60% of the vote already, and the rest of them are trying to get the Republican silver prize. That's what it sounds like.
Well, I think that so much of the Republican Party is just the uniparty with Democrats that at some point in time they think that they'll be able to get Trump off the ballot. So then if Trump is unable to be elected in certain states, they'll probably run their own person and they'll select a DeSantis or a Nikki Haley. Like they'll do the garbage thing the Democrats do where it's like, yeah, they'll have a primary. People will like a Bernie Sanders or they'll like a Tulsi Gabbard, but then they'll just use technicalities to take them off the ballot or get them off of debates. And then they'll just force feed you your candidate where not unfortunately for the Democrats, F them, but the idea is they wanted a Kamala Harris. And then Tulsi Gabbard during one of the debates essentially nuked her from orbit. So then they said, okay, we can't run Kamala Harris anymore. I think it was Bloomberg was their other guy. And was Pete Buttigieg running at the time? I forget. But the idea that they couldn't get steam behind any other people. So they just had to use on they had to go on the vibes. I don't know what the word is right now, but just the good memories of an Obama presidency. They just had to use that with Biden because Biden wasn't running while Tulsi was running. And then all of a sudden they like, oh yeah, once she's out, you got to bring back Biden, got to dust him off, you got to send him out there. He was not equipped for debates, but they use that. And then all of a sudden, okay, he's our guy. They selected him for the liberals in America to vote for, just the way they selected Hillary Clinton, even though I don't like him, most of my liberal friends loved Bernie Sanders in the 2012 election. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, they select them for them. And not 2012, 2016. But they select them for them. And it's almost like they want to do that for the Republicans. They want to get Trump off the ballot. But I just think there's nobody. If it's Trump and Biden, Trump wins. No, the culture has changed. The culture has shifted too much. But it's like, yeah, the Republican the debates right now, it shows how corrupt our media is. It's saying Nikki Haley's doing good, Chris Christie's getting good points in. It's like, no, these people they're terrible. Like nobody cares about what they want to push out there. Like how much we need to support overseas warfare and how much more Zelensky needs our support because if he doesn't stop Russia from this, then we all lose democracy. It's like what the
people are done with it. People don't even care about Ukraine anymore. It's off people's tongues. They're over it.
And the sad thing is, I said it on Twitter, but it's like, have you seen the most recent video of Zelensky begging for money? Like, if you don't have the money for us, just give us credit and we'll pay you back. And he's just doing this whole thing. And I'm like, he sounds like a kid in a toy store negotiating with his mom to buy him something. Like, oh no, if I can't do this, and it's like, or like a crackhead at a pawn shop. and it's tragic, but he sounds like he's an addict trying to get something and trying to negotiate his way into it. And it's like, yeah. This is not how world leaders typically sound. And I thought he was supposed to be painted as this world hero that was out there, wearing fatigues, and he was just the only guy brave enough to stand up against Putin and everything, despite having very bizarre vacations to other countries and showing up to meet who's that environmental activist, that girl, I forget her name.
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg or whatever. It's like, yeah, what do they have in common? Like they're using them like Marvel superheroes having cameos in each other's social justice movements, and it's like, no, this is stupid, but they do it constantly too.
That's really
But no,
funny.
I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. On your question with the GOP and their debates, I think that it's a race for the silver medal, but it's also just fundraising for each of them, because you know how it's like that's a shady thing. You run even though you can't win, because you can do a lot of fundraising for your war chest that you're going to do in other positions, but then also just. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't just the Republicans colluding with Democrats to try to get Donald Trump off of the ballot, because then they can get their uniparty person in there. Because let's be honest, a Mike Pence presidency isn't going to be that much different than a Gavin Newsom or a Biden second term. It's just be more the same.
It would be all the same as the uniparty. It's that thing. I thought it was really funny, the Vivek Ramaswamy show the other night, and from his performance, I think he would make a great press secretary, not a president of the United States.
And the only thing that I was saying with Vivek is like, he seemingly came out of nowhere. They found some old footage of him at like I believe it was debates or something. It's like, okay, could he be a industry plant? Likely, he could be. I don't know. Even though he shows up on the World Economic Forum website, it's like there's been other politicians that say, I have no affiliation with them. They just use my name and my picture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't control that website. So it's like, maybe he's a plant, maybe he's not, but I'm willing to roll the dice with someone that's an outsider like him way before I'd say, give the reins of Nikki Haley or Mike Pence or Biden again. Yeah, maybe he turns out to be an industry plant, but then maybe he turns out to be another Trump. Does he have the experience to run a country? Likely not, but Donald Trump didn't either, and that was probably the only reason that we didn't have, mass lockdowns due to the virus. Like, imagine a Hillary Clinton presidency when COVID hits, we would be a very, very different Australian, Chinese-looking country right now.
Well, I think that was the appeal to Trump. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a presidency with no new conflicts. It was a vibrant economy. I mean, some of the parts of the economy, there was a lot of borrowing, so there was a lot of that. That's not ideal, but things were largely better, and they were on the up and up. And then,
well, I just think about no new conflicts. I know people that have friends back in Armenia, and I'm like, well, did you realize at the end of his presidency, he was brokering peace deals in the Middle East? Like, you understand that, right?
Yeah.
That was him. That was his people. And then now you're actually having conflict and a possible major war breaking out in the Middle East. And you guys still support the idea that Donald Trump's bad for the war. Like, no new wars. That has to be just the only thing he runs on. No new wars. And also saying, hey, if I sat down Zelensky as president, we'd end the war in 24 minutes. Or 24 hours.
Yeah, and this whole thing that's going on in Israel and all of that, and I'm not weighing in on that stuff because I have no dog in that fight. But all I want to see is peace going on in these regions. I can't stomach it. I can't stomach all the horrible shit that's going on over there. But yeah, to see. What Trump would do moving into onto the negotiation table, he would go in and he would negotiate with each individual leader. It wasn't these these joint whatever action groups, whatever.
Our
Hydra
blue-haired delegate who we sent to China, and China said, "This is a disgrace. You're sending some lady with blue hair in front of us. You're not a serious country." And it's like, I don't think that happens under Trump.
No,
and I'm not even the biggest Trump guy. I just think that we'd be better off with Trump. I don't know how much gasoline is over there in Canada, but right now I'm seeing $5.50, and we saw $6 for a bit. And it's I know people in the country here are complaining about $2.50, but I'm like, no, it's literally costing me $80 to fill up a tank. This is not sustainable. Yeah,
we go by liters in Canada, so it gets a little confusing. Liters per Canadian dollars. I mean, it's expensive. We're well over $2 a liter here in British Columbia. So $2 for a gallon sounds awesome for us. That would be absolutely fantastic. But again, this is another thing. So we're looking to lean right politically, just like the U.S. is looking to lean right politically. And I think if both countries were say we got a Trump presidency, and then we also got Pierre Poilievre, who's the contender to go against Trudeau, and we don't have. It's so weird.
I'm glad that you pronounced his name first, because I was like, is his name Poilievre? I don't even know what the heck that is. So it's Poilievre.
Yeah. So just think Polly and Ev.
Okay.
Yeah, Polyev.
Polyev. Okay.
That's the English way to pronounce it. There's probably a French way with like more vocal in the throat
God.
kind of shit. But like that's I don't speak French. It's funny, I'm bilingual in Canada, but my second language is Japanese. And
okay, awesome.
That's because my wife's from Japan, and I went over there to learn the language and culture and stuff. But
that's awesome.
Anyway, so Pierre Polyev, he's the contender to win as the conservative, and it's weird because our conservatives' color is blue and the liberals are red, so it's backwards in Canada, and it could get confusing if you're back and forth doing the political thing. But it's largely the same. It's get rid of the stupid taxes, get rid of the regulation on building homes, get rid of the regulation on building infrastructure, so that we can utilize the resources that we have in the country. Largely, you guys in the States became oil independent when under Trump.
Yeah, we were energy independent during Trump, and then Biden immediately detracted that and then emptied our oil reserves. So how does that help us? I have no idea.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. And in Canada, we're doing the same thing. We're shutting down pipelines ever since Trudeau got in, shutting down pipelines, shutting down LNG, which is liquid natural gas, which we have an abundance of, and we can be shipping off to, other places. But there's a lot of money in the coal industry in Canada.
Oh, jeez.
But it's funny because we made it illegal to burn coal to make energy.
What? So you guys are just gonna freeze, or what's gonna go on up there?
So we sell it to other countries, so that they can make energy, and then we can buy that energy back.
that reminds me of when the war in Ukraine broke out, and they're like, "Oh, we're no longer going to buy Russian fuel." So then Russia gave the fuel to India, and then India sold the fuel back to Europe. And it's like, "Oh yeah, you guys really showed them."
Yeah, you just paid more for it with a middleman.
Paid more for it, and you brought India closer to China through Russia. So I mean, yeah, good job, guys. Good job. You feel better. Greta Thunberg can yell at a little bit less people right now, but
And
good on you.
And that's a dangerous thing, like watching all of these powers come together that are not in our interest to come together, essentially. Like if Russia gets together with China and India, I mean, they could be an economic powerhouse, and that's not good. And I mean,
no, it's like India and China are supposed to be bitter rivals, and if you somehow piss off both of them in unison and get it so that it's financially advantageous for them to ally with each other, they're gonna do it. Because they hate what's going on in the U.S. right now. They hate us meddling with everything around the world. It's like, yeah, we don't like that Putin's bombing Ukraine or the countries are bombing each other in the Middle East, but it's like the U.S. does it too, and we probably do it more frequently than other countries right now. So it's like they have a reason to go against us. So why are we trying to pull all these people together? Like, what is it, the BRICS nations? Like, how does Brazil factor into that? I didn't know before I got political, but just the idea that, yeah, this is going to become a major issue for us in the U.S. and people are almost asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have a vested interest because I have family in Japan. And if China, gets emboldened in that region, especially with North Korea, with how they fund I mean, without China, there would be no North Korea. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
They would reform. They would be forced to reform, and then they would be more like South Korea. Or
they'd be better off.
Much better off.
Yeah.
I mean, South Korea, actually, Korea is probably one of the best litmus tests for socialism versus market economy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what is that meme where it's like, oh, let's just take a country, split it down the middle, make one capitalist and make one communist and see how it turns out in 30 years. It's like, yeah, you got Korea right now. You can see it. Go visit it.
Yeah, what is it, 80, 90 years since
I don't remember.
Since the split. And like same culture too. I mean, you had culturally the same people. So it's split down the middle, and yeah, I mean, just have a look. Actually, satellite photos at night will tell you exactly which was a better system, because you have vibrant South Korea, and then you have just darkness. It almost looks like a sea between there and China. It's unbelievable.
Which you got to see like how this is such a tiny country with such a huge cultural impact on the world, and also all this auto manufacturing, electronics manufacturing. It's like this tiny little country with not that many people, and nearly everyone on the planet is using their devices or getting their vehicles in their on their continent, and it's like North Korea could be doing the same exact thing, but no, they're under communism. So apparently, that's not a very good way to govern your people.
Not to mention shipbuilding. Shipbuilding's huge in South Korea. The Hyundai was like one of the companies before they did cars. That was like a huge thing that they did, was building ships, and in such an economical way that everyone's just buying ships from them. It's unreal. Yeah. It's unreal. And this is like a perfect example of the market economy. If you just let it happen, how good it can go, how good things can go. I mean, Japan had an issue after their economic boom and bust in the 90s. They went to low interest rates for over 30 years, and it's just been a tragedy. And Korea largely like overtook because they're just like, well, we're not going to do that. we're gonna go with normal market rates, and allowed their businesses to flourish. So, I mean, there's lots of examples all over the world. My biggest fear, and I keep showcasing what Canada is doing, is likening it to like Venezuela, what happened in Venezuela, because we're really on that approach, and I'd hate for my country to become that.
Well, the U.S. is doing that in certain pockets where they're giving reparations to certain people, and also they're doing universal basic income for certain people, and just turning themselves into little pockets of Venezuela. And you're taking these places that were once flourishing areas in the country, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. They're just bringing in socialist values and then wondering, wait, why do we look like Venezuela right now? we did the Venezuela playbook, but we got the Venezuela answer. Like it's ridiculous how they delude themselves into thinking that they're somehow going to get a different outcome from these same policies. But I mean, because they get rich off it, like in socialist countries, they'll continue to do it because people are stupid enough to fall for it.
Well, and I think there's two types of socialists. There's the ideologues, and then there's the people who the Kool-Aid drinkers, and then the people who know what's really up. And
well, it's just a thing where communism and socialism have their place, where I forget who it was, but Naval Ravikant said it more recently. He said, with my immediate family, I'm a communist. With my extended family, I'm a socialist. With my neighborhood, I'm free market. And then, with the city, I'm socialist. With the city, I'm a Republican. And then so on. Then I'm free market when it comes to my state. And it's like, yeah, I can understand having socialist values and trying to help out your immediate community. But once you take that scope too far out and say, hey, look, let's bring in people that actually don't speak the language, have no serviceable work skills over here, and let's just promise them unlimited resources, that socialism is going to break down very quickly. And that's what we're starting to see in the real world in 2023 in these very, very deep blue cities.
Yeah, well, it's all about accountability, right? If there's no accountability for where those resources get allocated to, people, and the problem with commons, obviously, like people will overconsume. If it's all free, let's eat it all and eat it up quick before it's all gone, right? And then there goes all the resources.
And it's sad because I worked a regular job where I employed I'd say entry-level people that didn't really need that much skills. Like they didn't need a diploma to work for me. But the idea that once California and LA started doing the it was like a rent freeze where if you weren't able to pay your rent due to the virus, they wouldn't evict you. They couldn't evict you for like 18 months. But there was that, and also there was all the unemployment benefits. But also unemployment benefits were increased by local government here too. So it's a lot of these people would make more money by not working than by working at the time. So all these people I knew didn't want to be employed, and they were just like, oh no, I'd rather just live off of unemployment benefits or disability benefits or any of this stuff. It's way better. All I get to do is just, hang out and get fast food and watch TV. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And it's like, oh, wow. So not only do socialist values bring in people that are going to take advantage of it, you'll start to have your lower working class just opt out of the working circles and just start to take advantage of it. And I'm like, yeah, that's immediate collapse across the board. And yet they want to do it again. They want more of it. Oh my God, it didn't work this time. We can't afford bread and gasoline now, but if we tried one more time, maybe our politicians will get a little bit more richer and then they'll solve our problems.
It's always the same disaster. Always, every single time. I'm going to get to a couple of super chats here. We've got a new one that just came in. Vesper Design with $10 says, the object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself. Sorry, to escape finding yourself when there's. I'm dyslexic, and when people don't put spaces in there, the objective of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself in all the ranks of the insane. Marcus Aurelius. That was a quote. We also have here from Shar for $6.99. Hey, Clyde, just finished that Patrick Moore book from Amazon on sale if anyone is interested. Thanks for the recommendation. And that was the book Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom by Patrick Moore. He was one of the founders of Greenpeace, and he left because they were ideologically nutbarred. And he went on to talk about how a lot of this stuff is malarkey. Steve's Hyde with a $5 super chat. Don't want to interrupt, but I want to tell Decoy I love his channel and I hope he gets out of LA safely.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Brian Bernhardt with a $20 super chat. Last part of what needed to be said is in the comments at the bottom at the moment. Okay, I'll check that out after. Thank you so much, Brian. Vovin with a $2 super chat. Socialism is state owning the means of production. Absolutely correct. Getting cereal for $5 says it gets so cold in Canada even the banks freeze in the winter.
It's fucked up.
What's this? Oh, the name's too long, it doesn't fit on the page. I'm Justin Trudeau, I'm voting for something else. For $5 says was reported yesterday that anyone who wants a heat pump should check with their insurance company about maybe needing backup heat source. Oh, that's terrible. So in Canada, they're trying to push these heat pumps on people. Of course, there's a top bureaucrat who's, benefiting from the sale of heat. Yeah. But they're pushing these people into heat pumps, which don't work in very, very cold weather. I'm sure. Jesus. I'm sure in California on the cold nights it'd be great, and in Texas or whatever like that. But yeah, in Canada where it gets like minus 20 in some regions, you're not helping out at all. Vesper Design with a $10 super chat, just supporting you. See another quote. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. Lions led by a sheep. Just without the comment, without the spaces kills me. But led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Alexander the Great. Yeah, that's a good quote. Thank you so much, Vesper. But as for this conversation, I'd love to have you on again. This was such a great chat, Decoy. Big thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, big thanks for everybody who tuned into the live stream. We went a little bit longer than I normally do on the live streams. It just got wrapped up in the conversation. It was so good. So big thanks. Everyone head over to Decoy Voice. If you're not already subscribed, get over there. Give a subscription to the channel. You won't be disappointed. He's always got that concise and lighthearted commentary that we were talking about earlier. Love to hear it. Good stuff coming from the channel. And of course, as always, thanks. Is anything you want to throw out there at the end here? Socials, places. I just
appreciate you having me on. It was fun. I think that we've kind of been arranging this for a while, just kind of schedules clashing a bit. But no, thanks for having me on. It was a fun conversation. I'm glad to know a little bit more about what's happening over there in Canada and kind of how different countries, but we're experiencing the same issues at the same time. So hopefully you can kind of get yourself out of the way. Maybe over in because you have dual citizenship over in America or possibly over in Japan, because I don't think I can live all the way over there away from my family, but I think that, or family in California, but I've heard nothing but good things about Japan.
Oh, it's beautiful. I lived there for 3 years and
oh, nice.
Yeah. In Tokyo as well. Like it's the land of convenience. So it's so easy to have everything. One last super chat from Vovin for $2. DV, come back and discuss failing West Coast BC/CA.
BCC.
So British Columbia, I guess in California.
Oh yeah, failing LA. Yeah, how it's I mean, that's like he just talked about how I'm going to be leaving the area because of just how bad things got, and they opened up a I'll say a certain basically like a homeless shelter near me on my block, and it's like this is a failed state. Like it's I wasn't going to leave LA for a little while longer, but it's like no, it's crazy how much of a failed state this is. It's like you have all these people. Oh, we need to make homeless people not be homeless, and they just opened up this shelter, and all of a sudden you have all these people loitering around all day, starting fights and taking poop on the concrete. Like it's ridiculous how bad.
There goes the neighborhood kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's a phrase like, oh, there goes the neighborhood, but it's like I've never seen it happen in real time to me in the span of a day, you know.
And the conspiracy theorist always wants to come out and say like, yeah, maybe they put that on there on purpose because they want to devalue the property. Everybody leaves, and then they get rid of that, and then come in and buy up all the property.
Well, that's part of the conspiracy theory. Is like my apartment complex was in a nice area, and I've been here forever. So it's like I pay lower rent than everybody around me because I got it a long time ago. They used to give us checks, like huge checks, like thousands and thousands of dollars to move out, so they can move in somebody at the newer amount. Since that thing started going under construction, there's like an alarming amount of vacancies in the complex I live in. And I'm like, wait, how come nobody lives here anymore? Like this used to be a hot happening spot, and now all of a sudden nobody wants to live here. And I'm like, wow, that was like night and day. It's crazy. And I'm like, maybe they're like the conspiracy theory is like maybe they're not filling these units anymore because they want to tear this down to make even denser homeless shelter here instead. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's terrifying. But anyway, awesome chat. Stick around after we end the live. I'll have a little bit more of a chat with you. But as for the live audience here, thank you so much for coming out and tuning into the live stream. I won't be doing the Twitter Spaces thing this week because it's been a rough week. I got this cold and I'm just recovering. So I might pop into the Discord after. So everybody go over there if that's where you're going. And we'll see you guys all in the next one. Keep on trucking.